I am Nnimmo Bassey. I direct Health of Mother Earth Foundation based in Nigeria. I'm here at the COP principally to meet other environmental justice activists from around the world to learn about what the struggles are and also to share ideas on how we can move forward to get our leaders to understand that this is no time to play politics with climate change, but to take real action. Well, when we met at 2011 and then again at 2015, we were still thinking that it was possible to have a situation where temperature increase above pre-industrial levels will not be much more than 1 degree. In fact, in 2009 at COP15 in Copenhagen, that was the debate, that anything more than that would mean suicide for Africa. But over time, the world has gotten to believe that it's okay for us to have 2 degrees temperature increase above pre-industrial levels. And people are even romantically attached to 1.5 degrees, forgetting that what we have now, which is about 1.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level, is already a big crisis. We're having fiercer storms, tornadoes, all kinds of climate freak weather events causing disaster across the world, fires in the US, floods in Europe that we've never experienced before. We're having very big cyclones on the east coast of Southern Africa. One cyclone alone killed 1,000 people in Mozambique. And we've seen more intense weather events. And so we are actually now in injury time. This is when policymakers ought to realize that something must be done now, otherwise we may go down a slope that we cannot return.
What has changed in the last 10 years is the discourse around the climate crisis in the rich countries especially, because of millions of people taking to the streets, committing acts of civil disobedience and organize. Talk about the climate movement, what are their victories and what are their challenges?
Right, the climate movement over the last decade has grown in a way that we may not have expected, now led by young people, and it's rightly so because the entire scenario the paintings that we're seeing, the future we're seeing belongs to them. In fact, right here in COP26, with the most ambitious government saying they will become net zero by 2050. It just means 30 years down the road. Some of these political leaders would not be around by that time to see the consequences of the action. So the young people know that they have to take the bull by the horn, more or less. Pardon that that phrase, but they have realized that they have to act now. They have to force the policymakers to do what is needful. I think the urgency and the entry of the young people has also energized previously very compliant civil society movements, and the gap between the radical and the how would I say now, between the radical and those who were more aligned to the midstream is narrowing. We're seeing people realizing that the false solutions are truly false, not just being called out by radical groups, but that really these things are not working. For example, the current net zero idea. Net zero, everybody knows that net zero is not zero. It just means you keep polluting, then find a way to show that your pollution is offset somewhere else. The whole carbon offsetting thing is just a way of buying time, allowing fossil fuel industries to thrive on the blood and on the graves of the poor.
Over 1,000 environmentalists have been killed in the struggle against powerful interests since the COP in Paris 2015. You are fighting against the crimes of oil companies in Nigeria on the side of the Ogoni people. Tell us about the killings and what's happening right now in the Niger Delta.
Well, we see more and more earth defenders losing their lives, all because they're standing up against big corporations and repressive governments who work hand in hand with these transnational corporations and other corporations who do not want to be accountable or transparent. In the Niger Delta specifically, 26 years ago, Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 Ogoni leaders were executed. And so the anniversary, 26th anniversary, comes right in the middle of the COP 26. So 26 years after the execution and 26 COP, we don't really see a situation where the leaders of the COP have taken any position to limit the influence of fossil fuel companies even on the climate negotiation. And so we're still having a very steep slope to climb because those who are responsible for human rights abuses, those who are responsible for the disappearances, and those who are supporting national military formations to subdue and oppress their peoples, they are still very much in the saddle, in the driving seat of the climate discussions. And this really shows that going forward, unless something really changes, it's still going to be as difficult as it is now.
What are the impacts of the climate, the global climate heating in the global south? We have seen huge droughts in Africa. Millions are virtually on the brink of starvation in Madagascar. Tell us what 1.1 or 1.2 degrees Celsius feels like in the south.
Africa, temperature increase in Africa is about 50% above the global average. So 1 degree or 1.1 or 1.2 degrees global average translate to something higher for Africa. It's already more than the minimum set by the ideal target set by the Paris Agreement. So when the Paris Agreement says 1.5 or well below 2, it's really saying Africa could go to blazes. Africa could burn if they want. That's more or less what it means. Right now, we're having a lot of challenges, as you mentioned. Food shortages in Madagascar. We're having, right across the continent, we're having coastline erosion, where land losses along the coastline. In the Niger Delta, it's about 2 meters being lost every year. And that is dramatic because we're losing buildings, we're losing infrastructure. We're also having issues of desertification in places like northern Nigeria, intensive desertification. At the same time, rather than protecting our forests, we're having massive deforestation, compounding the problem. We're still having the fossil fuel industry burning giant gas furnaces, releasing carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous, and sodium or sulfur oxides into the atmosphere, compounding the problem. So we're really having a very desperate situation in Africa where the root causes of global warming are still running rampage across the continent. In Uganda, oil companies are working hard to extract oil and pipe for export through Tanzania. Oil companies from Canada are searching for oil in Okavango, in Botswana and Namibia, and they claim to have found the biggest oil find in recent time. So that means millions of more carbon or greenhouse into the atmosphere. We're still having conflicts in Nigeria and all across the continent. So the situation is dire. It's really serious. The causes of global warming are still being intensified through the extraction and burning of fossil fuels, and then the impacts the people are being forced to migrate. That we're really having a lot of climate refugees from Africa. We're having water stress in northern Nigeria and other places, and so everything adds together to blow up in violent conflicts, sometimes colored like religious conflict, whereas it's actually climate conflicts. And this is leading to so many problems. All the more reason why African leaders, when they go to conferences such as COP 26, should focus on the impacts they are suffering already, and not just ask for climate finance, but ask for climate debt. A climate debt has to pay. Somebody should be accountable for taking up the carbon budget, for taking up the space in the atmosphere where greenhouse gases could safely stay at a reasonable levels. Somebody should pay for that. And when we talk about loss and damage and all these things that the rich, powerful nations are unwilling to debate, to talk about, our people should either go on with the debates or pull out of the COP completely.
We heard again promises by governments especially from the industrialized countries, to save the planet. What is your appraisal of that?
Well, before Copenhagen, we were talking about binding emission reduction, where the next one, these industrialized countries were obligated to cut emissions at certain levels in a way that is verifiable. But since Copenhagen and since Paris Agreement, everything is voluntary. So anybody can say whatever they want to say. No, but there's no way of holding them accountable for held responsible for what they pledge. This is why they could come to COP26 and pledge to end deforestation, some of them to end deforestation by 2030, a pledge that's been made several years before. It's just rehashing the same old feel-good statements. All these pledges are more or less hot air. They hold nothing, and they don't hold any promise for any reasonable action.
Let's come to the financial industry. They promise to align their investments in the future with carbon neutrality by 2050. Your comment on that?
Again, that's another false speech. The more the financial institutions tell us they're not going to fund, or they're going to withdraw from funding fossil fuel activities, projects, the more they go on doing that. The fossil fuel industry plans to invest up to $250 billion in Africa in the next 1 decade. By 2050, the plan is to invest about $1.4 trillion in fossil fuel projects in Africa. Now, this is not going to come from their pocket. It's going to come from the same financial institutions who are saying they're going to become carbon neutral. They're just speaking, and anybody who believes them is just ready to be taken for a ride.
Let's talk about the military. What is the connection between military and war on the one side, and the climate crisis and climate politics on the other side?
Well, I guess when governments set up the military, they're setting them up for purpose of fighting wars. And sometimes the industry that supplies the ammunitions and the armaments are also happy for conflicts to flare up. And this is why we have so many conflicts in the world today. Most of them are resource conflicts. There are conflicts want to sell the military equipment, conflict to test new weapons, and they're choosing poor countries to inflict these weapons on. We've got Libya completely almost level to the ground. We have Iraq shattered. We have war in Afghanistan. None of these wars are neutral. None of them are based on differences between citizens of these countries. They're all about resource colonization and resource control by powerful external interests. In the climate negotiations, we keep hearing over and over again that military emissions are not counted in terms of how much carbon we have in the atmosphere. So it's willful omission. It's not that the world doesn't know that this is one of the most polluting sector with their aircraft, their ship, and everything. So to willfully exclude that means that the entire climate talks with regard to amount of carbon in the atmosphere is just another layer of games being played with human lives. And then secondly, the military is so powerful that they attract so much investment, so much resources that could have been used for building resilience. They reduce resilience by destroying nations, destroying infrastructure. They reduce the capacity of citizens of many countries to withstand the impact of global warming, because whatever resilience they had before is being bastardized by warfare. And now the UNFCCC rich country pledges to raise $100 billion from 2025. Previously it was from 2020, but now the date is here, so they've shifted the deadline again. Now, at the same time, the rich countries are spending close to $2 trillion in warfare on war equipment every year. So the military is one sector that is stopping real climate action from being taken.
What are your demands toward the industrial countries, so especially the US and the EU, also concerning climate finance, loss and damage reparation? What does climate justice and a real Green New Deal globally look like?
Well, I think the climate negotiation should go back to being serious about the principle of justice, of common but differentiated responsibilities. They should not only look at future responsibilities or current responsibilities, they should look at historical responsibilities. I do believe that this is a time for vulnerable nations and small island states, nations in Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, to demand climate reparations by a payment of a climate debt. And then secondly, the rich countries, now it's time to transit immediately. Immediately, they shouldn't wait to stop using fossil fuel till the next decade. They should stop now. They have the capacity, they have the resources, they should invest more in renewable and make a rapid transition while allowing time for the poorer, weaker nations to equally plan and transit to a renewable system that will help us keep the planet at habitable levels.
You're against solving the crisis with carbon markets. There are people, even among environmentalists, who believe pricing coal, oil, and gas could reduce its use. Why do you think that that's the wrong way to deal with the problem, for a solution in the end? And why are there better alternatives to get out of the crisis?
I think it's a mindset that unless you put a price on something, people will not take action in that direction. And so people try to put a price on carbon as a way of attracting those who would emit less carbon to have a credit and then to pay that will be paid for by those who wish to continue emitting. So you have the climate is not based on mathematics. Nature doesn't work by arithmetic. So you could not just say, well, because somebody paid for carbon here, therefore they're going to do the right thing. For example, they try to use forests as carbon stocks through the RED project. And so you designate one forest as a RED project, and then people leave it alone, then they move to another forest and do all the deforestation. So nothing really works. The thing is for the world to agree that this is the time to take real action, stop emissions at source, and it simply means leave the fossil fuels in the ground and not just place the carbon in or place trees or whales or elephants on the market shelf and believe that they're going to take care of the carbon. If we don't cut the emissions and we just say, well, we're offsetting, we're carbon, and now people are talking about carbon capture and storage. They're talking about burning burning all kinds of different ways of absorbing carbon from the atmosphere, carbon capture and storage. Talk about ocean fertilization, where you put iron filings on large tracts of the ocean. There will be algae bloom that the fish that would eventually die and go to the ocean, the bottom of the ocean. All these kind of proposals are just ideas, good ideas, but they would not work like that in nature, because some of that algae will be eaten by fish and the fish will die and release the carbon, and some of the algae will never get to the bottom of the ocean before something else happens to them. And then there are talks about whitening the clouds to reflect, for radiation management, to reflect more of the radiation into space, or to genetically engineer trees to have white leaves so that you have the albedo effect, they will reflect everything to the atmosphere. Now, all these artificial means of climate engineering would need to be done at planetary scale, and they'll be done continuously without stop, because the moment you stop doing it or something happens to disrupt it, then everything blows up at a more rapid pace and create more problems. So carbon trading and carbon offsetting allows for experimentations that are not proven, that are expensive, and that will also tilt the balance of power more into the hands of the rich, powerful nations and place vulnerable nations at more risk. Because nobody's going to engineer the climate and then disadvantage himself or herself. It's going to be those who didn't have any hand in either putting the pollution in the atmosphere or putting those devices in the atmosphere. And we also see that some of these ideas are from people who just love carrying out experiments. But you cannot carry this kind of experiments at a small scale. And once it gets out at the planetary scale, it has massive implications for for a number of people in the world. And we can't really afford this. This is why we insist on real climate action. Cutting emissions, changing our lifestyle, moving away from modern industrial agriculture, which is destroying forests and giving rise to monocropping, supporting small-scale farmers, supporting agroecology, which gives us healthy soils, healthy food, and healthy farmers, and cooling the planet on top of that. There are very simple things that we need to tackle global warming. Cutting down our waste, cutting down overconsumption, and living within planetary limits.
What gives you hope, Nnimmo?
My hope is in the young people who are rising up and speaking up. And if the younger generation really continue this way, I believe that sooner than later, they would also be in position of authority to make the decisions. And this will be a game changer.
Could you please recite a poem for us, probably the one you wrote for this COP in Glasgow?
It's entitled Injury Time, because we're really in a climate injury time. 12 years ago, we were already in injury time, fighting for a temperature target of 1 degree Celsius. Today, nature has been patient enough, so patient not to call off the game, though the ball has since left the pitch. Nature has given humans a moment to think. This is extra time in injury time, and it is time for action. Here we are, redefining idiocy, trumping good sense with xenophobic nationalism, silencing the victims via vaccine apartheid, standing on nationally determined contributions, nationally determined self-destruction. Here we are conferencing and partying as though global warming has suddenly become a national warming and not a global catastrophe. This is extra time in injury time. It is time for action. The celebrated Paris Agreement set out 1.5 degrees and obviously jokingly added, or well below 2 degrees. If my mathematics is right, well below 2 should fall far below 1.5, right? But flags were raised, glasses were cleaned, bags were slapped to celebrate such errant technical nonsense. This is extra time in injury time. It is time for real action. Now the con men openly run crazy. Do what you can do. Lie about what you will do. Set deadlines to when beings on the planet may all be dead. Net zero by 2030, net zero by 2050, net zero by 2060, net zero by 2070, net zero by the turn of the century. But net zero is not zero. This is extra time in injury time. It is time for climate action. Keep polluting, we can capture the carbon. Keep consuming, we can bury the waste. Keep cooking the planet, we can set sunshades in the sky, fertilize the ocean. If folks stay stupid, we can label whales and elephants as carbon sinks. Reinvent slavery and colonialism for more sinks. But this is extra time in injury time. It is time for climate action. The Sahara is expanding. Deserts showing up in the Amazon. Polluters fighting to trash Okavango. Glaciers are melting. Climate refugees floating on the Mediterranean. Forests burning. Oceans cooked. Islands disappearing. Mad cyclones. Hurricanes. Yet you dig more fossils. Burn more coal, oil and gas. And power low-cost invasions across the Horn of Africa as you worship fossil dollars on the altar of greed. This is injury time, and it's time for action. We refuse to allow polluters and madmen shooting wildly with hot guns on COP movie sets, dancing with hot guns on the graves of the poor on COP movie sets. Awake people, arise people. Mother Earth is not a movie set. This is extra time in injury time. It is time for action.
Thanks very much, Nnimmo Bassey, for the interview.
Thank you very much.